Welcome back to Disney World. We are once again live here at the 2015 PMI Global Congress in Orlando, Florida. You are listening to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. And with me is Jesse Fuel. Hello, Jesse.
Hey, Cornelius.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Good to be here with you.
Yeah, we have to hurry. Your presentation is in 2 hours.
I know. I'm pretty excited about it.
All right. Can you hear me now is the topic of your presentation, but what I would like to hear from you now is what do you see coming in the future for us project managers? What is the new and upcoming trend?
I think the key word is versatility. I've heard a lot of people use the word agile to describe not so much a methodology, but a mindset. I'm seeing the leadership the talent triangle that PMI's introduced, that a project manager can no longer be a process policeman. You now have to have a diversity or a versatility of skill set. One of the other trends I'm seeing is that there's conversations now about blending your methods. It's not just about following the PMBOK guide by the letter. It's not just about following Scrum by the letter. You've got to be versatile about blending the right solutions for the right environment. And then also about your physical environments. We're no longer working in the same office anymore. And so you've got to demonstrate some versatility about working with people who are in other offices, in other companies on the other side of the world, or the growing trend, more and more project managers working from home. So versatility, I think, is the key word, whether we're talking about your skill set, your methods, or your work environments.
All right. Can you hear me now? Working with global distributed virtual teams. Well, that ties nicely into your trends analysis just now. Why the topic of virtual teams?
I think what we're seeing now is what I'm calling the new normal, where there's been, over the last 15 years, an emergence of technologies that have made virtual collaboration less of a luxury and more of a standard infrastructure status quo. Video codecs, where video compression now is more via broadband, the ubiquity of broadband in homes and in offices across the world, and these strange new collaboration tools, social media now for the office, whether it's Chatter or Jabber. We're seeing now that there's a new normal, and people who have spent 15, 20 years in the workforce are being challenged to retool. And people are asking, Jesse, where do I get some information, some tips and tricks? Because just scheduling a meeting in Outlook the way I normally would do, now I've got to think twice about the infrastructure we're going to use, about the time zones that people might be implementing, whether or not there's an agenda for this meeting, because people need to come prepared as opposed to a casual conversation at the office. So that is indeed one of these trends that I'm seeing that's driving a real need for input and tips and techniques.
Your presentation starts in a little over 2 hours. When the attendees walk out of there, what is the one thing you really want them to take out of the room with them that you can also leave for our listeners right now?
The one thing is to try something different. Break the old habit that you've been accustomed to. I mentioned scheduling the meeting in Outlook. Another one would be, well, we need to have a conversation about this. Let's just have a meeting. And I think that one of the habits we get into day to day, whatever they are, we've got to be intentional about letting go of what we used to do just by instinct and habit of practice in the professional force, and be intentional about establishing some ground rules for a team, such that we all speak business English, not your UK English or your American English. We've got to be a little bit more sensitive about idioms that people may not understand. If you're working with people that might be working from home, we've got to be comfortable with there might be some interruptions. What are the ground rules about a blended workforce? Some working from this office or that office, instead of just assuming that everyone is going to behave the same way that you do in your office. So that would be the one takeaway, is to take a look at what you assume to be normal practice in your office and stop and ask a question among your team. Is this going to work for us? Or do we need to rethink some of our assumptions about day-to-day interactions?
Your presentation basically has 4 parts: context, collaboration, communication, conclusion. We're going to follow that along a little bit. So let's start out with the context. What is the definition? What do we need to know as a basis to better understand global distributed virtual teams?
Well, the operating definition is this, that a remote team, a virtual team, is one where at least one person is not working in your office.
Just one.
And at least one. As soon as we start at just having the one person on a seven-person team, and then there's one person who's dialing from home, and we're all going to meet in the conference room together, and we'll just dial in Sanjeev. Sanjeev is now an outsider, and we're going to be talking and collaborating over the bridge phone, over the Polycom and the desk, but Sanjeev isn't going to be having that same in-room dynamic that we're having. He may not even be able to physically hear some of the sidebar conversations. And imagine when we compound that problem when we're talking about 3 different offices on the Polycom together, sidebar conversations, different dynamics in the room, and then you add on top of that language, and you add on top of that different cultural norms, and now we've got a real communication issue. So if you start understanding that equality starts with all of us, working together on the same understandings and assumptions. That's the operating definition.
All right.
That's the context that I think we're driving with.
You've already talked about a few warning signs that you should start thinking about when the lack of side conversations and communication. What other warning signs do you see with these global distributed virtual teams that we need to consider and think about?
The number one thing is unspoken frustration.
Oh.
Unspoken frustration that I can't believe that I have to stay up until 9 p.m. for the check-in call. Or I can't believe that I have to wake up at 5 a.m. for this meeting with the executive at headquarters. And it's not fair that the Indian office, they speak Hindi half the time when we're on the conversations, whenever they're doing their sidebars, and I don't understand what their sidebar conversation is. It's not fair. Or it's not fair that when I need people to get on the phone, they're taking a 3-hour lunch. And we don't have common ground rules about that. So instead what we do is we complain. We complain privately to our coworkers that happen to be in our situation, or we might complain to our boss, but we haven't taken the issue up vocally with a family conversation. Let's just have a family conversation. So as soon as you start feeling frustration or pain or confusion that isn't spoken, it starts to simmer a little bit. And that immediately impacts teamwork, which immediately impacts productivity and coordination. And so the sooner you get this up and out into the open, I think, is the sooner things are going to start to improve. So that's the warning sign. When you start feeling stuff that's frustrating and painful and annoying, and you don't hear anybody talking about it, that's the warning sign.
The obvious follow-up question is, how do I get it out into the open? I'm putting myself into the shoes of a project manager right now who has a virtual team. Everything is going great from my perspective because I don't hear any complaints.
Yes.
So how do I know that there are frustrations out there? What do I have to do in order to make people stand up and say, you know what, this isn't working?
Well, one of the key words every project manager should know is Kaizen. And you should, every project manager worth his salt will have regularly scheduled Kaizen conversations, whether you could use an agile retrospective, whether you have a lessons learned meeting in the middle of a project, not waiting until the end with a postmortem. And in those meetings, you have to put your facilitator hat on. Instead of your coordinator hat, you put your facilitator hat on and say, okay, I realize that maybe things look great from my perspective, but we believe in ruthless improvement. We believe that the status quo, by definition, is not what we should be. If you believe in continuous improvement, then by definition, whatever we are doing today is not what we could be doing. And so that would be the first thing, is to set some ground rules that this is the one conversation that I'm vowing not to chime in as the project manager, because I'm putting my facilitator hat on instead of my coordinator hat. So create the space for safe conversation. Give it a name. Give it like the Kaizen meeting or the lean workout or the agile retrospective. Give it a name so that people know that that's the forum where they can do it. Or maybe you designate somebody as the process improvement champion. Then we don't have to wait for the regularly scheduled meetings.
If you have a problem, go complain to Susan.
Or go complain.
She will take it up.
Yeah, exactly. The Scrum Master, or if you're doing that, or maybe the PMO, or somebody who's been designated as the person who's willing to foster conversation about not doing stupid things anymore.
All right. Wonderful. So much for the first part of your presentation, the context. We're moving on to collaboration. What are some collaboration considerations?
Well, I've alluded to it already, and that is moving from me to we.
Okay.
Moving equality. And that one of the examples that comes to mind is video. If there's some video infrastructure set up in your office, like a Cisco telepresence or a Microsoft Link or something along those lines, I notice a lot of people are uncomfortable with video. They don't feel like it's just not natural, but they're completely natural being in the same physical room with people. And there are legal considerations many times with video recordings that where you have to have proprietary considerations and about information being shared. And but putting that aside, if half of us are doing something one way with video and the other half of us are not comfortable, we're not collaborating. We're not.
From my personal experience, I have a small team of 4 people, including me, and we meet every day at 9 o'clock for a quick get together. Call it a daily scrum or a daily stand-up, whatever you'd like. It's just our daily quick coordination meeting that we do. We didn't used to use video. It was over Skype. We were just doing audio. And then Jonathan and I attended a presentation at the local PMI chapter. And the guy there said, use video in your presentations, because as soon as you do, people will be much more attentive, because you can no longer turn away, go on mute, and do something else.
Yes.
We started doing that, and the throughput, the output, the intensity of our meeting has increased manifold. So to me, that was a small change that really helped our team to take the next step and be there, be present, and really pay attention.
I couldn't have put it better myself.
Yeah, it doesn't stop the UPS guy from arriving exactly in the middle of the meeting, and you have to get up and walk away.
But you know what? As soon as I see the door, as soon as I see that, and then you come back, I'm a little bit more sympathetic.
Yeah.
If I see your child walking up behind you in the middle of a status meeting,
we have that too, all the time.
Now I'm more sympathetic, because I'm sensing that this is the reality dynamic. Here's another collaboration dynamic, and that's time zones. I was working with one client that had an office in Dallas, Fort Worth, another office in Pennsylvania, out in Pennsylvania, and then another office in Bangalore, India. And so they had almost a 12-hour spread of time zones. And so this became a bit of an issue, because the Bangalore team was scheduling their meetings that were convenient to them, which meant the Americans had to wake up at 4 a.m., at 5 a.m., 3 a.m. to be a part of these meetings. Yes. And so in the spirit of going from me to we, from my convenience to our equality, we started putting it on the table. Team, the core work hours do not line up. We're going to have to make an adjustment on both ends. And so we challenged the India team to take the second shuttle home that left a little bit later in the afternoon, around 6 p.m. So that would allow the time zones to be a little bit more aligned on the American side, to where, you know what, I can dial in from home at 7 a.m. I can do that. Okay. If I can dial in at home at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m., that's much more reasonable than 5 a.m. And then the Indian staff were saying, okay, well, I can still make my home shuttle at about 6 p.m. in the evening. And so now, as a result of that, we now have live collaboration meetings that we just simply did not have before. We became regionalized. And so when both sides make the willing effort to compromise and to sacrifice, we make the joint effort. Now we're collaborating, because we share the pain. So those are just 2 examples of collaboration, the collaboration mindset.
All right, so that was collaboration. We're moving on to communication, and what I'd like to talk about here is the toolkit, because you talk about building a toolkit for communication.
Yes, a toolsmith has more than one tool in his toolbox. You cannot be a successful global team, a successful remote team, using only a conference phone. It will not work. You've got to start looking at having a broader toolkit, like finding what is a business IM tool that we're permitted to use in the office. Well, we're not permitted to use AIM, or we're not permitted to use Jabber, and we're not permitted, okay, fine. Go to IT and ask them, what is the approved business IM tool that we're permitted to use in this office? And then another one is, well, we can't use Skype because it's blocked, and we can't use Google Hangout because it's blocked. Okay, go to IT and ask, what are the permitted video collaboration tools that we're allowed to use? You cannot simply rely on your old habit of scheduling a conference bridge. Oh, and by the way, stop scheduling a different conference bridge number and a different conference bridge code for depending on who books the meeting. Can we please just have one number and one code for all of our team's meetings? So there's that. So yeah, diversify your toolkit, but also don't complexify it to the point it's not usable. That's more tools in your toolkit so that you don't just rely on the one technique.
All right. You also then talk about mixing and matching all of this together.
Yeah.
What are your tips to mix and match?
Well, this goes to another way to phrase mix and match is not either or, but both and. So not either video or screen sharing, but both and. So I know a lot of people say, well, Jesse, our tool doesn't allow us to do video headshots and screen sharing at the same time, to which I would say, get two projectors. Get two projectors so that one computer is displaying the video feed and the other computer is displaying the screen share. Another one would be, well, Jesse, why would we don't need to use IM because we have video collaboration? Well, maybe you've got some people on your team that aren't comfortable using English verbally. They're much more comfortable using Google Translate. So I'm absolutely cool with them typing into an IM window whatever comes out of Google Translate on their end. This happened to me when I was in Beijing, and I saw a number of guys there that were using Google Translate to take the English and turn it into Chinese characters and vice versa, and then paste it into an IM window so they could more effectively communicate with their global counterparts. So it's not either I'm using one language or I'm only using another one, or it's not either I'm using IM or I'm using video, or either I'm using one screen share or one video. Both and. Mix and match. Blend it together.
All right. Let's take a quick sidestep here, because we are talking about virtual, distributed, global teams.
Yes.
You're very big in the Agile world, and Agile is very big about co-location. You have to bring your team together, that the same team works out of the same room, they're in the same building, they're on top of each other. That's the best way to get your project done. That's no longer the case, though.
There's a new normal. The new normal is that we're just not staffed that way. And to say to people, well, then you can't be agile unless you rehire your staff in a different way, that they're based in different areas, that I'm going to ask people to physically relocate their jobs in order to be part of an agile team. And if I were to go academic on this and theoretical, I would make the point to an agile expert, and I would tell them that distance is more than geographic. We have organizational distance, silos. We've got relational distance, cultures and language. And so the co-location of people tended to be the one trick that would overcome a lot of that distance. But if we embrace the idea that we're overcoming geographic distance, organizational distance, skill set distance, then we can start finding ways not to have people co-located physically, but to have people co-located virtually. And using these techniques that we've been talking about for the last several minutes. So what does co-located virtually means? Using the same technology. It means that we're using the one dial-in code all the time. It means that we're using the one chat room thread all the time. It means that we're not trying to find each other's messages in the noise of email. Email is not co-located because there's all this distraction and noise in there. What is co-located is where we're spending time to sit down and talk about what are our ground rules. And so we're building organizational co-location virtually without having to rely on the trick of physical co-location. It works. I mean, it's simple, it's straightforward. It usually means you've got fully allocated resources because they're there in the same war room as you. It usually means that you're speaking the same language because we're all in the same domestic physical space. But in the new normal, where I've got people working from home, I've got offshoring, I've got reverse offshoring, where now we've got a lot of foreign companies wanting to break into the U.S. market, and we got a lot of American companies wanting to break into foreign markets. There's a new normal. So that's my challenge to the Agile community. In fact, I was at the Scrum gathering in Phoenix on this topic, and I put up a slide where I said, "Remote is the new Agile," and then there was this collective gasp in the room. Oh, no, he didn't. and so. So this is still a topic, interestingly, I think, that project managers have come to grips with a little bit sooner than the Agile community has.
Yeah, I was going to put my Agile hat on and say, you know what, this virtual co-location is never going to work. Have you seen it work?
Absolutely. I just finished an implementation with a client of mine where they were increasing their geographic distance from the being an East Coast U.S. versus a West Coast U.S., a Silicon Valley versus a Pennsylvania kind of environment, to where now they were going from that to India. And so we increased the geographic distance, and we dramatically increased the collaboration. And the reason is because we removed the organizational distance. It was no longer two different companies. Now it was the same company that all reported to the same vice president. We also we talked about, sharing the pain with those time zones, where we all each made a contribution as opposed to just saying, well, the Indian people have to take it on the chin, or the American people have to take it on the chin. And that's, I mentioned the Beijing guys. I mentioned there's, when I was working at Tesco, there was a great deal of collaboration between the Indian office and the UK office. I've seen it over and over again. It works, but it takes work. That's the thing. It doesn't happen automatically. You've got to break your regular office habits if you want it to work.
All right, let's bring it to a close here. What is your number one recommendation to our listeners? They're project managers. They lead distributed virtual teams. They have these online meetings. What one improvement can they make? What one area should they focus on where they get the biggest bang for their effort and buck?
Well, I'm gonna repeat myself because I can't help it. Going from me to we. Sit down and have a team conversation about what are the ground rules that are going to be common across all of us, whether we're working from home or whether we're working from the headquarters or the satellite office. And what you might find is, you know what? We don't need video, but we do need IM. Or I might find out, you know what? We don't need bridge calls, but we do need Skype. Or you know what? We don't need to meet every single day. Or you know what? And so until you sit down and have that conversation about what are those ground rules going to be, you might not know what tools in the toolkit you're missing. You may not know what mix and match would be the most relevant. So the first thing that you should do as a project manager to get more collaboration and therefore more engagement and therefore more productivity out of your team is to sit down and have just that conversation. Ask the team. That's one of the aphorisms that comes out of the Agile community. Whenever you're wondering, is there something better we can do? Ask the team, see what they say, and then roll with it.
All right, Jesse, thank you very much for your time, and good luck on your talk.
Thank you, sir.